Awesome. So let's go on to the next, is managing expectations. So this is also another one, especially when we are working remotely, that we don't have the opportunity for your staff member to turn around and say, hey, Katrina, what do you think about this? Or how do I answer this? And like, you know, should I be working on this particular area? So we want to be really clear up front of what, you know, what our systems are, what our information is, what we are wanting to guide them in what they need to do. So, you know, providing them exactly what you want done and how you want it done. So Judith, I know that you were talking about setting up your due dates, you know, your tasks with due dates to allow them to know exactly when the stuff has to be done.
When something has to be completed by, and so therefore it also gives the staff that opportunity. I mean, if they've done today's tasks, they can be looking ahead to tomorrow's tasks, right? And starting a plan and saying, well, if I get this done today, then that will make tomorrow easier, and I'm already halfway there on that. But the other thing that you need systems, right? We have found that for our staff, between the pure bookkeeping system itself, the staff manuals that we create, and the client manuals that we have for each client, most of my staff should be able to find the answer to their question in one of those three places. If they can't, it means the manuals aren't written properly and we have to get on and fix that problem. And we have found that when we had our Filipino staff start, we found that we definitely didn't have everything written as clearly as it should have been. And we're gradually improving that. Yeah. But what if they've got those? And the other thing that we do is we start a Zoom call in the morning and invite all our team on. And so that's open all day. Now, obviously, there are times when different people aren't available and so they can just log out. We can have team meetings using Zoom. The Filipino team can just get off. We put them in a separate chat room. Off they go, do their team meeting, come back. But we find that that way they can always have help from someone. There's usually someone on the Zoom session that they can ask if they can't find the answer in the manuals.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's important not to gloss over the systems and the processes that you need to guide your staff with, and that will help with the communication that we're going to talk about in a moment. Yep. But just having it really, really clear so there's no confusion, so that, you know, your staff member is not going off on a tangent and assuming. So we don't want our staff to be assuming. So, you know, just to be really clear and concise. Yep. Nick, how are you seeing your clients managing those expectations as well?
I think this is probably one of the areas that a lot of people struggled early. And I think that it wasn't necessarily the owners or the partners or the, like Jude, for example, it was the team members were struggling because their work environment was now their home environment. And not only that, they also had their family there. They had their brothers or sisters or aunties or uncles or parents or wife or girlfriend, or I think, so a lot of people struggled with the whole balancing of, you know, my work environment turns into my personal environment and my work hours turn into my personal hours, and it's all one and blended. So I think it's really around setting that environment where you have a work environment, but you can leave it. So if you know, for example, if you're having to use the kitchen table, which some of our clients in Australia and that are, then you pack it up at the end of the day and it becomes a kitchen table again at the end of the day. And that you have your regular breaks throughout the day. And I think if you have a team, the biggest thing you can do is ensure that they're having that structure and help them with that structure. I think the other part of it is to just check in on people and, you know, give them the expectation of what you're wanting them to achieve. But the second one is actually finding out how they're coping. And, you know, this has been talked about a lot, but it happened with me with our chief of people. I mean, I travel 140 days a year, so I'm not used to being home. My family are not used to being home every second week. And she reached out to me and said, Nick, how are you? And I'm like, just a standard response. Yeah, great. You know, everything's fine. She wrote back saying, no, Nick, you travel 140 days. I'm sure you and your family are struggling. How are you? And it was just opening up a conversation of not just, you know, where's your work at? It was really caring. So I think that managing your team's work environment managing what they're and understanding what they're going through, because it's not normal. No matter how much we want to say, and there's a lot of talk about we won't go back to the office environment and go back to normal. Well, these are not normal times, so you can't make those decisions yet. But when you have very clear process, you have very clear systems, I think that the managing the remote, people have excelled at it because of the way that their infrastructure has been set up. But equally, I think we've seen a lot of businesses that have really struggled because they don't necessarily have full cloud systems. Or if they do, they don't have processes structured. And what that has meant is that team members have struggled because they couldn't just walk into your office or walk to you and ask the question. So I think personally, this is some of the best times, and I look at it from the positives we take away. This is really showing whether businesses are, accounting and bookkeeping firms are really ready for remote and global businesses. And if you don't have the systems and process, then that's great. Learn from it. But then what you have is the opportunity now to put that in place. And it's not so that if this happens again or any of the disaster recovery, it's going to make your business better. It means that, think about all the time. And I think this is the big lesson I've learned from a lot of the bookkeeping firms that I've spoken to is, they said, the amount of time that I was spending with staff answering questions that I haven't been able to do now. And I realize that's because there's a lack of systems and a lack of technology. So what I've learned throughout this process is I need to fix that. And I think that's, perfectly topical for what we're talking about today is what can we take away and improve our businesses moving forward? Because what's happened. We don't know if it's going to happen again. We don't know how long we're going to continue with this, but what have you learned that you can really fix so that you're going to make your business a better business? Whether that means you just work from home forever, so be it. Or if you go back to the office, so be it. But what have you learned from a system and tech point of view that didn't work quite as well that could be improved moving forward?
And Heather's asked a question. Nick, you might answer this one. What do you do if team members are not coping, but they say they are?
I think, to be honest, as a leader, you need to understand, or you need to know how to ask the right questions. And I mean, my chief of people, Megan, was a prime example. My response was, everything's great. And she knew me enough to be able to go back and go, well, how's your family coping? Because you're not there every second week. How are you really coping? I know you're telling me you're okay. So I think it's not just accepting what someone says. And I use this as an example I know that you've all heard of it, but when I speak in an event, I normally talk about how I walk in the office each morning and I say hello to the team. So this morning, we're back in our office in the Gold Coast. There's 18 of us here. I walk in, I say hello to everyone. I keep going past my desk. I'll walk past them and go, how are you? I'm not really listening to what they're telling me because I'm just expecting they say good. But if they turn around and go, my husband just left me, I probably wouldn't even hear it. So it's active listening. And I think that's really, you need to be more in tune now with actually asking the right questions to get the answers that you need, as opposed to, if I was asked, how are you at the moment, Debbie? You go, yeah, great, I'm really busy. Yeah. You're always busy. Like, how are you really, Deb? Like, how, And I think,
and you know what, Nick, that means that you're actually taking the time. So instead of saying, how are you, Deb? And I go, yeah, I'm good, thanks. You go, great. Now, let's get on to business and we're going to be doing this and what have you. You actually pause. It's blocking out some time. It's the time that is the critical thing, where you take a breath and you go, no, actually, I've got time here with you now. Just let's have a chat. Let's have a coffee, a virtual coffee, and find out really, because your staff appreciate the fact that you do stop for them, that you are interested in them and their well-being, and you're going, no, I'm serious. Like, really, how are you? And that takes time.
I don't think a group environment's necessarily the right. It's an area to be able to do it as a group, but I think it's just checking in one-on-one. We call them soft check-ins. Just those soft check-ins, like, how are you? And I know Jude does this really well. Her team are really engaged with her, and it's all these little things you need to do just to ask the question and genuinely want to hear the response. And if it's bad, help them. If it's not, then, and if it's just great news, then fantastic. But, everyone's got their own challenges during these times. It's very different for everyone. So I think taking the time and structuring it in your diary to go, you know what, for the first half an hour, if you're a leader with a team of 18, like when I walk into our Australian office, I need to genuinely be able to connect with them all. So I need at least half an hour to do that. So the first half an hour of my diary is literally going to check in with people. So, you know, you need to put it in your diary is probably the other part, you know.
That's true. Yeah, and we forget about that. We glance over, you know, the relationships, the cultural, the things that build the culture around the business.
Can I add one point to that though? If you look at performance management and where people are not performing, when you actually look at all the research and the studies, most of the time it's a personal issue that they've got at work. So a personal issue that they've brought to work that's a reason for their performance. They're not as accurate in the work that they're doing today. It's probably because they've just had a fight this morning with their partner at home and they've come to work and they're still worried about that, and then their mind's not on what they're doing. So when you look at performance management, a lot of the times the issues are actually related to a personal aspect of their life, not the business. So if you're not taking the time to actually try and help them through those, you know, you don't have to be a counselor, you don't have to be their best friend, but you need to be sympathetic and you need to be able to, you know, lead them to be able to focus on what they need to be focusing on, because you don't know what issues or problems or things they've got going on in their lives if you don't really know them well enough.
That's very true.
Amar has asked a question which is kind of linked to this, I think, but Katrina, perhaps you can let me know whether we've got enough time, but it's about culture. And Amar's asked, how do you create a culture of fun in a remote working environment?
Our team, when we have our team meeting, every so often we have a block where we just say, okay, what are the movies you've watched this week, in the last week, in the last month? And we have a discussion around that sort of thing. Just something different that's not work, where we're actually getting to know each other a little bit, and we create that. We have a bass dinner every quarter. Once the basses are finished, right, we go out and celebrate. Filipino team go out and celebrate. Lindsay goes out in Scotland and the Australian team go out. Because for us, we're getting together again in a social environment where we're just relaxing together. We've had a hard slog getting all the basses done. Now it's time for us to relax and do something together. My Australian team absolutely love the fact that in the Philippines, they celebrate birthdays and work anniversaries really big, much bigger than we think about in Australia.
Yeah.
And you know, my Australian team love it because now they're getting chocolates for their work anniversary, right? This is the sort of thing that you can do. We've even found somewhere that can send it to Lindsay in Scotland. No worries. You can do all sorts of things wherever the people are. You can still help them celebrate and still make that fun and part of your culture.
That's great. You got any other examples, Nick?
Yeah, I think, look, I could talk about culture all day. I mean, it's one of the things that I do talk a lot about often. My comment to keep this short is culture is a process. So culture is not something that is made, I mean, it is made by people that are part of it, but the reality is it is a process. So how do you build process in to make a good culture? I mean, like Judith just said, you know, have some fun as part of your Zoom meetings, you know, still celebrate people's birthdays, still celebrate achievements of the business during these times, but it's just a process. It's just really building to go, what is the defined culture that we want? And then how do you build that into what we're doing remotely? You can still celebrate people's birthdays. It's still delivering cakes and cupcakes, and you can still have fun. I mean, I've seen so many people dressing up. I mean, we did a 4:30 every Friday. We would have virtual drinks and a roundup of the week with our, you know, each of the countries we're in. And so it's just really prescribe it though. It's build a process of how you want to build the culture that you want your business to have. You know, otherwise the culture that you deserve will be built, which is what everyone else builds.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very true. Somebody else will make that decision for you if you don't bring it in. Yeah.